consciousness is the new currency. I read that on Instagram and I immediately was like, holy crap. Yes. Raising consciousness of humanity, the planet, is such an integral part of this ascension process that we talk about a lot in the podcast, but we've never really dug too deep into it. But I really, truly believe that this is the key to receiving everything that we desire in this life, in this 3D reality that we've created. But in order to do that, we must become aware of it and aware of the power that it has. And that power is us, because we are consciousness experiencing kind of the world within this avatar that we created.
Yeah. It's like we're evolving towards a point where we can transcend our, call it like our animal nature, which is based in a lot of ways on acquiring things. It's like the acquisition of food, the acquisition of shelter, the acquisition of a mate, like all these things that we need to go out into the world and get. And as we evolve in consciousness, it's getting to a point where we have the opportunity to focus more on the evolution of consciousness than like our physical needs, if that makes sense. And I think it will, as we start to go deeper into what the evolution of consciousness is and what it means. But that's the first thing I think of when you say consciousness is the new currency. Like right now, the culture and society that we have is, for the most part, based on accumulating money.
Yes.
So that we can acquire things to make ourselves feel safe and protected and, able to survive.
Exactly.
That's where I'm kind of going with this. Where now, once we get past that need, where like all of our physical needs are met, the focus can be more on rapidly raising our consciousness and seeing the world drastically differently.
Yes, I agree. Everything is so material.
Yeah.
In this illusion of a world that we've created. And it's becoming aware that it's not wrong or bad that we created this. We created this to learn from.
Right.
But the problem is we're so stuck in it and we're not aware of how to learn from it to transcend it. And that's, I think, really the importance of consciousness. And I didn't even know what consciousness was a few years ago. I mean, really, I truly didn't know what it meant to be conscious, what it meant to do things unconsciously, how you raise your consciousness, all these things that we're going to talk about and really dive into, because this is really, I believe, kind of the beginning of a series of episodes that we'll do.
Yeah, I think we'll have to.
We're going to break everything down very simply, or as simply as we can, because consciousness has so many layers and complex and so intelligent, but that's us. So we're going to explain it to the best of our ability, that we understand it in this moment as we're waking up, as we're becoming more aware, as we're becoming more conscious from our lens and our point of view.
Yeah.
And we'll go through episode by episode, diving more deeper into these levels of consciousness and how to transcend them, how to recognize them, what's going on when we have reactions, emotions, feelings, how that's affecting our frequency and our energy that's dictating our reality.
Yeah. It's one of those things that's like consciousness is everything. So I want to say, let's back up. So we did record one episode previously, pretty recently, on consciousness and sort of what is consciousness. And if people didn't listen to that, I recommend it. We'll put it in the show notes, a link to it, so people can easily find that. And what I want to do today, I think the best way to go about it is to take sort of the next step where we talked a lot about what is consciousness, or it's everything. For the most part, it's energy and it's awareness. But
And really, sorry, I don't mean to cut you
Yeah.
off. And really how it's changed and affected our lives
yeah, and that's
from
what
our
right,
experience.
exactly why this is meaningful to us, obviously. We talked before about how consciousness is essentially energy, and that energy manifests in a lot of different ways. So what is really helpful for me is to recognize, like, the way that I see the world now, is that we are thought forms within the mind of God. And everything that exists is within the mind of God.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that exists has always existed. Like, everything that's been created is already, creation is done. Everything exists. And right now, what is happening is God is experiencing itself through each of us and the way that we experience the world and relate to the world and experience one another. So you're God, I'm God, this couch is God, and we are all experiencing this moment of sitting on a couch recording a podcast from three very different perspectives. And that is in a small portion what's playing out on the entire world. Everything is, it's just the experience of the interrelation of things, because all is really one. But when it's just this, the mind of God is all that exists, it can't experience anything. It's just everything. So in order to experience everything, it needed to create everything. The evolution aspect of that is is God learning about itself.
Becoming aware.
And becoming aware of itself through all the perspectives.
Every single perspective, an infinite amount of perspectives. They're infinite. That's what infinity is.
Yes.
There is no gender here when we're talking about God, because it's infinite. There is going to be endless possibilities.
So if you think about it, as people in this realm, we look to science to understand the world in a lot of ways. And science is always looking for answers and looking for, like, the end in both directions. They're building bigger and bigger and bigger telescopes to try and see the end of space. And with every technological advancement and every time the telescope gets bigger, all they find is that there's more. Going the other direction, they invent bigger and bigger microscopes and keep looking smaller and smaller and smaller. And every time the microscope gets stronger and they're able to magnify and look further, they just find more of the same thing. It goes on infinitely in both directions forever.
This is what we mean also when we talk about as above, so below, as within, so without. What is in us is also in the macro sense. So the cells within our body is what Dan is explaining. When you have a little microscope that has an insane magnet, it's going to keep going, right?
Yeah.
We thought that there were, the atom was the biggest thing. It's like, nope, it's going to keep going. And scientists are proving this. This is what quantum physicists and theorists and everything have proven. So they also know that the bigger the telescope looking out into space, you're never going to find the end, because there is no end.
Right. That's exactly, I think the way I see it, it goes on and on forever in both directions, because anywhere you look, you're going to find what you're looking for. So it's essentially fractals. And that's why it's hard to wrap your head around the fact that something could go on forever in both directions, bigger and smaller, with no end or no beginning.
Yeah.
It's a really, really complicated and complex thing to wrap your head around.
It is.
Especially when you get wrapped up too much in the material world and assume that everything has to have a beginning and an end, and everything has to have been created by something. But if it's just thoughts in God's mind, it's easier to realize that it can go on forever, because it's like Russian dolls. You can just keep thinking, keep opening it up, and there's a smaller one inside. You open up and there's a smaller one inside, and it's always going to be there as long as you look. So I think that what we're being shown as we develop stronger telescopes and stronger microscopes is that if we keep looking outside of ourselves, we're never going to find it, because it's internal. And that's like what we're looking for is within us. What we're seeking is seeking us. It's God learning to understand itself. And we are just an aspect of perception. And that's why I also like to think that every one of us is a center of the universe. Because when you realize that it goes on forever and it's infinite, there is no center. But also any point is a center. Like if you think about the outside of a sphere, any place you put your finger is the center of the outside of that sphere. And it's going to be equal distance around from everywhere, because it's all even and equal. That's us. That's what we are. So like if put your finger on me, I'm the center of the universe. You're the same thing. Every one of us perceives the world from the center, but it's infinite centers because it never ends. It goes on and on forever. And I believe it's like a torus field that eventually at the end, it just goes back to the beginning and starts over, and it's just cycles and cycles of time. So I hope that isn't too confusing, but I think that is a necessary kind of baseline to start thinking about the evolution of consciousness, which, like I said, is God understanding itself. Or if you don't like the term God, that's also fine. It's the universe experiencing itself. It's the all experiencing itself. It's the source experiencing itself.
Creator.
The creator, whatever word is more comfortable.
Yeah, and I do want to just also point out, when we reference God, we're not talking about a bearded man in the sky.
That's a great point.
No, I really like.
It is really important.
That's not what we're talking about. That God is not a person,
just a mind, I think, or just
in my opinion. In my opinion,
right. And that's just like opinion. We'll keep reiterating. This is sort of the best understanding of reality that we have come up with at this point, based on a lot of reading and studying and thinking and journaling and just constantly thinking about it. So we had talked about in the previous consciousness episode that consciousness is energy, and then we used the idea of the evolution of consciousness from a biological standpoint as an organism's ability to respond to its environment, which is essentially awareness. And we talked about how, and I just want to go through this quickly, as like a starting point, like a single-celled organism has its entire membrane, like the outside of the cell, as its, that's how it can interact with its environment. That is where it can touch and feel and sense the environment. And it gets to a point where a cell can only get so big, and then it can no longer become more adapted. So the next stage of the evolution is to expand, is to merge with another cell, or like grow another cell, however it works, to become a multi-celled organism. So it'd be two cells. So then it's a bigger external surface that it has more opportunity to interact with its environment. And then from there, it goes up to 4, and it keeps getting more and more cells, so that over time, the organism becomes more and more complex, so that it has the ability to respond and interact with its environment more and more. It has more awareness. As the cells also grow and work together, has more life force energy. So there's more energy in that organism when it's got 4 cells, or it's got 8 cells, and then when it's just 1. Over time, they become more and more complex, And then, but they get to a point where it can only get so complex that different systems of cells, different organisms merge with other ones. So we got to the point where you have humans, where we have trillions of cells, and those cells break up into different systems in the body. You have your nervous system, your digestive system, your respiratory system. You have different organs, and they're all individual organisms within a greater organism. And as the organism, as the body, the human body is so much more complex than like a little amoeba or something like that, or even just less complex animals like a fruit fly or something like that along the spectrum. Even though our DNA is actually very similar to a fruit fly, we have significantly more consciousness. We mentioned before, everything is fractals. So also, like the planet is very similar to the way the human body is set up, of multiple different systems that work together to create one organism. On the planet, you have different geological areas and ecosystems that all are interconnected and working together, and they're separate consciousnesses, and they make up the greater consciousness of the planet, which Earth is a living, breathing organism.
That's conscious.
That is conscious and evolving.
Yes.
So Earth is evolving and being living organisms that are a part of the system of Earth, and also, you know, individual people, but then we're also groups of people and the entire species. And there's all these different groups, and they all have consciousnesses. There's like a group consciousness. Mm-hmm. There's different fields of consciousness throughout the planet. And as the planet evolves, everything on it is evolving with it. But as we evolve, we also push the evolution of the planet. So I think that's probably enough of a recap of what the evolution of consciousness is. And now we can kind of dive into like more specifically how it works, because this has been something that has been, I think, really influential on both of us. I can speak for myself. Just as I started to learn this stuff and understand it better, it just blew my mind and like completely changed the way I see the world and see my interactions with other people and see like my own growth, my past, all these things.
I agree. It helps make sense of everything.
Yes.
It helps
so much
really to become more aware of the circumstances and conditions that I truly believe I placed on myself to learn and grow through as a part of humanity that's here to help the evolution of consciousness on the planet. There is no coincidence that we're really at a pivotal point in Earth's history.
Yeah.
The age of Aquarius is coming. I mean, I know it's not here yet. I'm not even sure if we'll technically.
Yeah.
I don't think it's here yet, but it's coming. I think this is like huge. It's a transition that we're waking up. We're becoming more aware. You can already feel the shifts of energy and consciousness changing when you begin talking to people. And they're asking more questions. And I believe it's so encouraging because the old is falling away. It served a purpose, but it's almost like we're so excited. We're these travelers wanderlusting through the forest, yet we still have this friggin' baggage that we're trying to carry. And it's like, we've got to let that go and just realize the past has served us and we can learn and grow from it, understand it. You always use this phrase of transcend and include.
Yeah.
There are things obviously that are really important that we need to take with us. So like there are survival mechanisms that are suiting us that we want to take into this next stage of evolution, but the majority of them, we don't need to. We've learned from them. We don't need to stay stuck in these boxes and chains.
Yeah. I love that the analogy that we're like walking through a forest, so we're carrying all our baggage, so we can't get anywhere.
Right.
But it's like those things have served us. They're not wrong.
No.
You just don't need them anymore. Or once you understand it, you don't need to carry around the memory once you have the lesson. You don't need to carry around the the judgment of yourself or the comparison or the guilt or the shame. You can just learn from the experience, which informs your consciousness so that you're prepared for the present moment, not the past moment.
Yeah. And I think, when I touched upon before, I didn't even know what consciousness was. I mean, I didn't up until about 4 or 5 years ago, or I had heard the term thrown out a bit and I couldn't grasp really what it was. But I will say, for any of the listeners who are newer to either the show or just consciousness in general, this isn't a coincidence that you're listening to this, because that's how and I think you too as well, became more aware that this is a really big seed that's going to keep growing if you allow it, because it's almost inevitable. This is going to help bring other synchronicities, channels, learnings into your field to become more aware, to understand consciousness from every different angle. Because I believe, even though within this wellness journey, we're constantly watching documentaries, docuseries, podcasts, reading books, all about spirituality, growth, the rays of consciousness, but you're seeing this in TV shows now, in movies and magazines, in books, in fiction books, not even everything. It's all around. And that's how you know that your consciousness is rising and that you're aware. Yeah. Because you're seeing it more. You're tapped in. You're now, I want to say tapped in, but at the same time, like exiting the matrix a little bit, like you're tapped into your higher self. Right? Okay,
It's really interesting. Like that's what I was saying before, like the collective consciousness, where you're starting to see all these things, like even just like superhero movies. Yeah. Is this like, it's just huge phenomenon that's like built up more and more and more over the last 10, 15 years, where it's now like, those are like the main movies that are being made. That's where our like entertainment comes from for the most part as a society. And it's all about like multiverses and different timelines and people that have powers and aliens that come to help and like all these like interesting topics, but they're all about like evolving as a species and evolving as individuals. And it's just really, really fascinating how that happens and how you like slowly have different things like the Matrix and like these different movies.
Avatar.
They like these movies.
Inception.
Back when like, especially like the Matrix and Avatar came out, they were kind of like out of nowhere. But now those topics and concepts that are in it are so deep in our community, in our society, that we have like, there's like cartoons for kids about like different like multiverses and different, it's just really, really cool.
I think Keanu Reeves said, I saw him quote, "The Matrix was not a movie, it's a documentary."
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I read that from, and it is.
Yeah. I want to get into power versus force.
Okay.
Because like Elise was just saying, these seeds get planted and we don't even really know what's going on. It's just, I had heard probably on different podcasts, people recommending the book Power versus Force, Power versus Force. I had no idea what it is. I'm like, I need to listen to this. And I got the Audible version and listened to that. And it blew my mind. I'm trying to think of when. It's probably 4 or 5 years ago.
Had to have been 5 because we're in 2024. Honestly, the best thing COVID did for me was that's how I know that was 4 years ago.
So it was definitely before that.
It was at least a year before that. So I'm going to say 5 years.
But I want to say, like, I listened to it. I've listened to this book probably like at least 4 times and a ton of his other books.
David Hawkins.
Dr. David Hawkins, absolutely brilliant. And we'll talk about him a little bit more in a minute. I first encountered the book, it kind of blew my mind, and I also didn't get it at the same time. I want to put that out there for people to know that for me, this has been, at least a 5-year process of studying this stuff and paying attention to it and trying to make sense of it and making sense of it, but not really embodying it. And it's been a process where now it's starting to get much more clear for me, make a lot of sense, and really like become my way of being.
I could not agree 100% more. And I'm very glad that you said that, because I've only listened to it once and I've been meaning to listen to it again, because that first time I listened to it, I didn't fully grasp it either. And I'm glad that you said that this has really been a 5-year journey, because it's, as much as we're learning and want and seek and have answers to questions come to us, we're also very much in the process of unlearning everything that we've learned. And that took decades, over 3 decades for both of us. So anyone listening to this, if you're not grasping, if you think this is too complicated, be gentle with yourself and understand you're rewiring the patterns of your brain that have been programmed for a very long time to think a certain way, to be a certain way, and that's okay. You're not going to become someone different overnight. The concepts will come to you, right? When the student is ready, the teacher appears. It's appeared. That's why I said, if you're listening to this podcast, it's not by coincidence. I've had a very challenging time unlearning and like unprogramming myself.
Same. So even knowing this stuff and like really like literally understanding it, there was still a lot of doubt in the back of my mind. It was like my ego messing with me and like, no, don't pay attention to that, because the ego doesn't want to be, you say, transcended, or it's very comfortable with its place on this scale of consciousness that I'm about to get to. And the ego perceives anything that it doesn't know through experience as dangerous and a death. So anything new to the ego is going to be perceived as a risk of death, and it's going to fight back really hard. So when you bring in the idea of wanting to seek out things that cause you to evolve, the ego is going to push you toward doubt and questioning yourself and not wanting to go further. But yeah, so we've talked about it enough. So I read Power versus Force by David Hawkins. And the book, so he was I think he's a psychologist, some sort of medical doctor, or some sort of doctor. He had, and the timeline is off, so like when you read the book, you can find it for yourself. He had an enlightenment experience, and I don't know if at that point once he came back to, he decided he was blissed out for a long time. He just did nothing for months or years, and then decided he was going to reinsert himself into society and serve. And just like, I've watched a lot of his lectures, I've read a lot of his books, and it's like there's such an energy and presence to his words. It's so powerful, and it just resonates as such an important truth to me that it's, listening to the books or reading the books, just being around that energy in itself, it will change you. It puts you in a really, really good place. And then on top of that, the information in the book is amazing. So at some point, and I'm not sure if he was researching consciousness before he became enlightened or if it was all after. That's what I mean. I don't know the timeline. Not important. He went deep into studying consciousness and the evolution of consciousness. And he put together this map of consciousness. So it's like a scale, in the same way that when light hits a prism, it refracts into like the rainbow, and it's multiple different levels of light that are all different frequencies. He basically studied consciousness in the same way, and is using a form of applied kinesiology, muscle testing, to determine what was true and what was not true, and did it with lots of lots of different subjects over many years.
Like thousands
Yeah,
and thousands and thousands.
Yeah, there's very, very like intense, peer-reviewed, repeated studies where they basically put together this scale of different levels of consciousness, beginning at shame as like the lowest level for a human, working up to enlightenment at the highest level. And it's a scale from 20 to 1,000, but it's a logarithmic scale. And this will make sense, I think, in a little bit. But they're measuring because they're measuring on multiple different things at each level. And the scale, or the numbers that we're going to refer to, is a measure of the energy associated with that level of consciousness. So I was saying before that as organisms evolve into higher consciousness organisms, they have the capacity to handle more life force energy. Same goes for people. So when you have a person whose level of consciousness is at the level of shame, and we can all kind of picture or understand like what somebody who's in immense shame feels like. That person has very, very low drive, very low ambition, very low energy. They can't even get out of bed. It's like severe depression where you can't even get yourself out of bed to go do something. That's really, really low energy. Where you have stuff higher up on the scale, like love and joy and like enlightenment, like that's like huge levels of life force energy where you're like really, really driven to do things. You're ambitious, you're excited, you're active. You can just go and go and go for days and you don't even realize you're tired because you're like in love with what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's how the energy of the scale works.
Yeah. I just want to say that enlightenment is, I believe, what we're striving for in this life.
Mm-hmm.
Very few people. So it's Buddha, Krishna,
Yeah,
Jesus, like those, they were enlightened.
Yeah. It's like the ascended masters.
Yes.
It's the people who are, it's like,
And we're working, we're working towards that.
But also the way that the scale works, it's logarithmic. So that's like, so I started to say this before. So like shame is at a level 20. The next one up is guilt at level 30. It's not just 10. And it's not a degree of 10. It's like logarithmically 10. So I'm not that great at math, but I think that means like 10 to the 20th versus 10 to the 30th, then 10 to the 40th. So like each one is like 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, 30 times, then 10 times 10 times 40 times. So it's like these numbers are like astronomically larger. But it all plays into essentially an average of humans. So you have somebody like Buddha, and then somebody like Jesus, like these individuals come like one at a time, and their level of consciousness is so high that it lifts everybody that they come into contact with, and it lifts the entire planet to a higher level, which is important because first off, we need that. So especially like 2,000 years ago, we were at such a low point in our consciousness of evolution on the planet, where you have somebody like Jesus come, bring so much energy that it literally lifts people to like have the drive to evolve. And that's, where we've been. And it's been like this slow progression of lifting like every few years. We stayed at the same for a very, very long time. And now we're just getting up just over 200, like a 207 or something like that. But also that same concept works with each of us.
Mm-hmm.
So as I lift my consciousness, I affect everybody else who I engage with or have any sort of relationship with.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up because I truly believe, and we talked about this before the podcast, that that's how I became aware. I've said this on multiple podcasts. I tell everybody that you've always been a step ahead, if not 10 steps ahead of me on this journey. And never once did you try to change me or convince my mind in any ways. You were always planting seeds. Oh, I listened to this great book. If you want to listen to it,
Mm-hmm.
I listened to this, or I'm changing this. Like, but all you were doing was leading by example and emanating this newer energy that is consciousness. Everything is energy. consciousness is energy. So as you changed yours, I'm in your field. We've lived together for so long. And I think that that really helped me and catapulted me into a newer level and a better understanding, especially when we listened to this book about 4 years ago. And I will say, I do believe a huge part of this was when we first moved to San Francisco 10 years ago. We had to almost leave the environment, the programs and the conditioning that had made us who we are, to almost start over and create our own way, our own path. And it led us, you and me, but to think differently, to learn differently, to be differently. This is what we're talking about. Be gentle with yourself when you're unlearning everything you've been taught and told to be. And yeah, it's just, it's so incredible. And I thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. That's a sweet thing to say. I want to read through these, just maybe it'll make more sense, and just the different levels, so that we can talk about what that does mean.
But wait, before we start doing this, you were talking about power versus force. I just want to make sure you touch upon.
I want to.
You're gonna.
I want to come back. I just want. I want to read all these first.
Okay.
So that there's some sort of sense to what I'm trying to say. So it's set up in these levels, and the scale is from the book Power versus Force, and it's also referenced in a lot of other David Hawkins books. But it's like at the lowest level is shame, and there's also there's a life view and a view of God, and there's sort of emotions in the process that are that equate with these. I want to get into those in different episodes, because it will take way too long. So maybe I'll just for the first one, I'll explain just so it makes sense. But you have shame, where when you're at the level of shame and you're at the level 200 for energy, you view the world as being miserable, and you view God as being despising, and it's equated with the emotion of humiliation and the process of elimination. As you start to work up, the energy goes up, the emotions seem a little happier, but you work up through guilt, then to apathy, then to grief, then up to fear, then to desire, then anger, then pride, courage, neutrality, willingness, acceptance, reason, love, joy, peace, and enlightenment. So with each one of those, the energy goes up, the emotions are a little better. And like I said, we'll go into that in later episodes. But the way that I see this, and the way that Dr. Hawkins explains it, these all exist all the time. These levels of consciousness are all different frequencies that exist simultaneously in the world. And we kind of attach to different levels depending on what our current level of frequency is. So these are all exist in the same way that when you have a radio, all the radio stations are playing in your room at once. And depending on where you tune the dial to, you attract to a different station. And that comes in clear, and you don't notice all the other ones. This is the same way you could have a group of people experience something and all get something different out of it, all perceive it completely different. Some people are excited about it, some people are upset about it, some people are really angry. It's because there's the experience of what's happening, and then there's everybody's perception of it, and everybody's perception of it is tied to their level of consciousness. So that's like Elise and I could experience something, the exact same thing, and have a completely different reaction to it, because my frequency is at one level and her frequency is at another level. It doesn't mean either one of us are wrong, but this is why when you have something like politics, where people are arguing completely different sides, they can argue for days. Neither one of them are going to change the other one's mind, because it's not an intellectual thing. These worldviews are not something that we change by thinking or by studying. It's about awareness and perception, and raising or lowering our frequency. And as our frequency changes, our level of awareness changes to match it. And we see something from a different point of view.
It's a great analogy.
Thank you.
Is analogy the right word?
Yeah.
Example?
Yeah. Example and analogies were both worked in there. So this is what changed my life the most, I think, when I listened to Power versus Force for the first time. I mean, the main thing that changed was that like I kind of began going down this rabbit hole of consciousness, and my life changed from that. But the way that I like tangibly changed is the way that I saw the world and saw different people, interacted with people, and was able to see myself. My level of awareness completely changed because I realized that it wasn't about trying to change people's minds intellectually, and that people didn't see the world differently because they had different information. People saw the world differently because they had a different level of consciousness. And that was really, really powerful for me. And I guess kind of like you were saying before, like I wasn't trying to change your mind. It's like that's what I learned, and it was a slow process. But I feel like I used to very much. I wanted everybody to see things exactly the way that I do or I did. And this really helped me to realize that no matter what I say to people, it's not going to change their mind because they're at a certain level. So as I was reading through these before, if one person is at, I said shame is the bottom. If somebody is like stuck in this idea of shame, you can't just say like, oh, cheer up, like we'll go do something fun. Like it's completely different because it's the amount of energy that they have, it's the emotions that they're experiencing, it's the way that they're seeing the world. So in order for that to change, they need to increase their awareness to be able to get to a level above shame, get out of that story and see it differently.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that and just want to speak from my own experience because for the majority of my life, I do feel I lived very much in guilt, shame, fear, victim mentality. And after listening to this book about 4 years ago when we listened to it, it helped me make more sense of my life. And it helped me make more sense of the people in my life and what they're experiencing. Because once you begin to become aware that you are consciousness and experiencing it through frequency and energy, that we all have very unique energetic signatures. Of course, there's going to be similarities, like, right? Like fear, shame, joy, like that's common. But understanding that your consciousness is either elevated or below that, then you can see how the other person lives their life. So you have to also experience these levels of consciousness to understand them. That's kind of what I'm getting at. So because I lived so much of my life in shame and guilt and like I was saying, victim mentality, until I raised my consciousness, could I then identify what that felt within me and then also see it in others? Oh, okay. I'm trying to have this conversation with someone and it's going over their head.
Yeah.
It's going over their head because they're at a level where their energy can't even sustain what I'm speaking of. It's because their consciousness doesn't grasp it.
Yeah. It's like if you're talking to somebody who is stuck in a level of fear, it's going to be really, really hard to convince them that it's not dangerous to do something. And yeah, it's like, it's empathy. Like I get so much empathy.
Yeah.
When you realize, like you talk to some people and they're just like, oh, like drive safe, wear your seatbelt, don't do this, don't do that. And it's like, oh, man, like you're so much in fear. but it doesn't make sense to be like, no, I'm not gonna, like, that's stupid. Don't feel that way, because that's not going to change anything. So you can understand people so much better.
Yes.
And I
There's
think
a
it's really, really
recognition
useful.
that comes with it, like an awareness of, oh, okay, this person is just playing out what they're
Yeah.
believing is to be true. There's,
Yeah.
like you said, there is no right or wrong, but I do believe there are higher ways of expression, which are higher frequencies,
Yeah.
these lower frequencies. And I do believe for anybody also who are familiar with the chakras, these energetic centers that are within our body are very much tied to these consciousness levels. Like the shame and the fear, the survival, those are our lower chakras, the root, the sacral, and the solar plexus. And then you kind of hit the heart, which is that neutral place. It's like the bridge that gets you into your throat, your third eye, and your crown. Your crown is your enlightenment. So it's almost like we need to work through these energy centers. Again, they're called energy centers for a reason. The consciousness is energy. So you can't, the majority of us though are stuck within this survival root chakra, this animalistic based survival mechanism. And I do believe, I think you brought up the ego before when you started saying, and I was the same way too, when we learned this, it's like, oh my gosh, I want everybody to know this and learn all this. But that was also our ego trying to, I believe, make everybody think the way that we did or I did, so that it was safe for me to think this way. It's like, it's not it's not me to determine that. I can only, like you did for me to do to others, is change my frequency, change the energy within me, raise my consciousness, so that I don't even have to speak to convince someone else. It's the energy knowing that that person is me, and they're going to be influenced by my energetic signature. It doesn't have anything to do with me telling them they're right, wrong, think this way, don't think that, be this way, don't do that.
Yeah. And it's also really good for being easy on yourself.
Yeah.
And recognizing that, like, we've all made mistakes, but at the same time, like, we're all always doing the best we had with what was available to us. You can only act up to the point of your level of consciousness. So when you look back at your life and you're like, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that, but you really couldn't have, or you would have. So just because you know something now, or I'll say, just because I know something now doesn't mean I should have known it 10 years ago. That doesn't make any sense. I probably only know it now because of the mistakes I made 10 years ago. So rather than looking back at myself 10 years ago with shame or regret, I can love that version of myself and be grateful that he went through the things that he went through. So I have the opportunity to be where I am now.
Yes.
And it's such a different view of life.
That's really what I talk about on the podcast constantly, of saying I honor those parts of me that got me here. All of the pieces of me, all the ages, all of the years, all of the segments of Elise, that little version of me. She only knew what she did at that time to merely survive.
Yeah.
And it got me to this point. I'm so grateful. She went through hell and back and has continued to do it. But everything has taught me valuable lessons that I continue to bring forward with me. I have to leave a lot.
Yeah.
And I've left a lot, but there's a lot that I've taken with me.
Yeah. And I believe that every time you do that, every time you let go of something and sort of transcend it and move beyond it and evolve, it makes the next step a little bit easier, because you just get better at doing that. And you get better at, like, giving yourself grace and being easy with yourself. So I think that over time, the evolution or the ascension, or whatever word you want to use, gets faster and easier. There's obviously always going to be challenges to meet, like, your level. I'm not saying like life gets easy,
You
But
just get better equipped to handle
yeah,
it
that's a better way of putting it. Yeah, you get better equipped to handle it.
because your consciousness is more aware
Yeah.
and capable. Really,
Mhm.
it's your, you have access almost to information on a level that is, it's indescribable. It's really hard to put into words unless you experience it.
Mhm.
And you will experience it. It just happens.
Yeah.
I feel that's kind of like a cop-out answer, but the people who know and are in this consciousness journey get it.
Yeah.
It's very hard to put into words. It's all felt. It's all, a lot of it is emotion based, which, exactly as you're talking, these are all emotions tied to feelings.
Yeah.
These things must be felt to be integrated, exactly like you said before. It can't be figured out intellectually.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's not that someone's not smart.
Right.
It
That's
has
just not the
nothing,
game.
no,
Yeah.
it has nothing to do with book smart or reading more. We read all the time, but we were stuck in that spiritual cage of reading for a good couple years because we didn't even know how to feel what
Mhm.
needed to be felt to transcend these levels of consciousness.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not nearly at the highest levels by any means, but you can fluctuate. I've experienced, I feel, in deep meditation, what joy is, just like crying hysterically, like with my eyes closed, just feeling this in nothing but blackness.
Mhm.
It's like, how is that possible? I thought that I only got joy from like being around people that I loved or having things or doing things. It's like, wait a minute. I see absolutely nothing, but my heart is bursting with friggin' joy and I'm just crying.
That's a
How do
really
you
cool example.
how do you
Yeah.
explain that to
Yeah.
someone, right?
Yeah.
Intellectually.
Mhm. And that is what's really interesting is at the sort of like lower levels of consciousness where, like I was saying before, we get stuck in that, like animal instincts and survival based where we think that everything is about acquiring something that's outside of us. So we think of, oh, when I get that thing, when I get that job, that money, that car, that house, then I'm going to have happiness. And then later on down the road, as you evolve and your awareness expands and you're able to see life from a higher vantage point, you start to realize that things outside of you don't give you happiness. There's like this internal joy from within. And that it's more about tapping into that internal, eternal joy that is within us. And as we do that, then we start to attract other things that are on the same frequency as that joy. It's what's commonly referred to as like the law of attraction, but it's not
So much more
necessarily, yeah,
complex.
it's not really like necessarily in the way that I think it's often understood and talked about. It's more about, we have these attractor fields of different levels, like I was saying before, and it's about tuning into the different levels of frequency. So as we raise our frequency up, the things that we bring into our life match that frequency, or the same things come into our life, but we perceive them from a higher level of frequency where we have more appreciation for them. We have more gratitude for them. We find more joy with them.
Exactly. I think really when I started the podcast off, that's what I meant by consciousness is the new currency. Because when you understand, you have to match your frequency to the frequency of what you desire to get it. You can't do anything
Right.
if you're in opposition to it. You know, most people, gosh, painstakingly kill themselves, work out long hours to get more money, and they may get it, but what they are missing is that if they can transcend the fear based frequency of not having enough money, raise their consciousness to match the frequency of abundance, that currency that they want to get more wealth, they're going to probably figure out they don't have to work 80 hours a week. Something magically is going to synchronistically come to them to bring them an opportunity that's going to bring them riches or wealth. Now we're using money as an example, but that can also be a partner.
Yeah.
Like match the love that you want in yourself and a partner. Like how many people say when I stopped looking for my partner, they appeared. That's what it is. You can't look outside of you. Look, like give yourself what you need. Again, quote unquote, the law of attraction, because you're putting that out, the universe, creator, God, whatever you want to call it, is matching that energy. It's just going, oh, you want this? Here you go.
Yeah.
On a silver platter for you. I do want to emphasize it's not as easy as that, because we do have, blocks and limitations and things that to transcend, like I said, these feelings and emotions. So, but that's the idea. And I think that really is the evolution of it. That's what manifesting is. You want something. I do believe as we raise our consciousness, manifestations come into our reality much more frequently when we drop the resistance and let go of the past limitations that we placed on ourselves.
Yeah, that's really well said. Yeah, and it's almost more the resistance and the limitations that we create than it is the calling things in. It's about stopping the resistance. And that resistance is all stemming from lower consciousness vibrations, lower consciousness frequencies that are within us. So you're talking about like the chakras earlier, like it's possible to have like one or many chakras that are blocked, or some that are lower or out of alignment, out of coherence with the other ones. So you don't get the full flow of energy, and at different parts, you're going to have different issues, or there could be different aspects of your life that align with different levels of consciousness. Maybe your work life is great and you're at a higher, like you go into the office and you're at a higher level of consciousness all day, and then you go home and your life at home is miserable, and you come home and you drop down in frequency, and you have these like fluctuations throughout different times of your day. You have different people you're around that raise your frequency, and different people you're around that lower it, or different environments. So it's not always like a steady thing, but when you're in that different level, even if it's day to day, the things that you're bringing into your life are going to reflect the level that you are at.
Absolutely. This is really important, to become hyper aware, vigilant, and observe every moment that you're doing something within the day, how it makes you feel. That's a really good way to figure out your consciousness level.
Yeah.
And I think that's how I did it, because I thought to myself, wait a minute, I am constantly annoyed. I'm constantly depressed. I'm anxious, stressed all the time. I was miserable in the job that I was working. Like, wait a minute. And I thought that like life was happening to me.
Right.
And it was like, no, it's just responding to my frequency and the lower levels of consciousness that I was stuck in.
Yeah.
And the minute that shifted, the doors open. It doesn't, I love this. This came to me in a podcast. No, it doesn't happen overnight until it does.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen overnight until it does. I was changing all these things slowly, surely. And I was like, oh, nothing's really happening. And then boom, it was like one day I woke up and I was like, holy crap, I feel so much better. I love everyone.
Yeah.
Not every day, all the time, but it's such, I can't describe it other than an immense relief. Like I'm able to breathe better. Like I feel the tightness alleviate from my body almost every day, a little bit on a deeper level. And it's like,
yeah, that's such a huge part of it is there is.
And I know it's not over, which is also so much more exciting.
And it's forever. Yeah.
What level I'm at, but I'm not at the level that I used to be in this grief and anger and depression and shame and guilt of my life. It's like, oh, okay. And to your point, I did not mean to cut you off. I apologize. I recognize when I drop into those frequencies. I used to get really mad at myself because I thought I, quote unquote, should be more evolved.
That's
It's
a
like,
good
no, no,
job.
no. It's let me experience this. This is a lesson. This is an opportunity here for me to understand guilt, anger, and shame at a different level of consciousness now.
Yeah.
And transcend it much quicker.
That's exactly where I wanted to go with this. That is right. Yeah, right. That's what makes this like utilitarian. It's like that's what makes this practical. Is I'll say from my experience, I didn't realize how miserable I was until I was no longer miserable.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, wow, like things are just lighter. I feel lighter. I feel more free, more energized. And that's like, for such a long time, I was like stuck in these low levels of like fear and anger. And I felt like I was a victim. I felt like life was happening to me, like you said before. And it's like there's a burden. There's this you have carrying around extra weight. There's a restriction. My chest would always feel really restricted. My shoulders would feel really restricted. Aches and pains throughout my body. Low levels of energy. Low drive. Low ambition. And as my awareness rose, exactly what you just said, I was able to see what I was going through from a different vantage point. And I was able to stop believing the stories that I was telling myself. Albert Einstein has like one of the most quoted quotes ever. It's like, you can't solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created it. And that's exactly why the evolution of consciousness is important. Because when you're in the situation, you don't see a way out. You just see more of it. And when you respond to something, like anger is a good example. Like when somebody does something and it makes you angry or it makes me angry, and I respond to that anger with more anger and like a equal and opposite reaction, essentially, or even like try to do more. Like you do something to me, I'm gonna do more to you. I'm gonna get you back. I'm gonna get revenge. That's all like low level, low consciousness actions that perpetuate the same state. So, like I said, like as I started to learn this and understand it, I was gifted with this empathy of like somebody does something to me, and it's like, oh wow, they must be really hurt to lash out like that. I know what that's like. I've been there, and I feel sorry and I feel upset for them, not mad at them. And it's like not perfect. I don't do this all the time, but for the most part, yeah, like people don't really upset me. You can sometimes.
I was gonna say,
Outside of Elise, people don't get. She knows how to get me. But for the most part, like I'm not.
It's a beautiful lesson.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's like because it's the stuff that I really need to work on. But for the most part, like people don't upset me. Like I used to get really upset if someone cut me off in traffic or somebody said something or whatever it was. I would be really, really like seething. And now it's like, oh man, they're having a really like bad day. Like that's got to be tough. I know what it's like to be at that level and to feel like that.
Yeah, it's about them, not you.
Yeah, and that's you. Once you get the perception to see that nothing anybody does has anything to do with me. Nothing anybody thinks about me or says about me has anything to do with me. It's like I could care less if people want to talk about me and like make fun of me. Like every once in a while they get me, but for the most part, I don't care what people think about me because I'm able to view it from a higher level of awareness where I understand that these people like hurt people. These people have been hurt. They're at this level where they believe that the only way they can get the safety and security that they need is to lash out and have people feel their pain or understand what they're going through or tell them how sorry they are. So I don't need to respond with anger and try to start fights and perpetuate these things and get stuck in it. So the point I want to make is that we're always going to experience these lower emotions, you're going to experience grief, you're going to experience anger, but it's a matter of being able to see it and recognize it and not believe the story that you associate with it, not get caught up and swept up in the emotions of it, let the emotions pass, and then go back to where like your baseline is, where you're used to, where you can have this more open, free awareness. And it's like you then have the ability to solve problems because you're not thinking from the same level of consciousness that you created your problems from.
Yes. For myself, I think forgiveness played a huge part in my evolution of consciousness as it's continuing. Because once I understood, going back to the beginning of the podcast, we are all God experiencing from, a certain perspective to learn and grow. It made me understand that everybody's on their own journey, and what's happening through conversations and interactions, meetings, all those people, like you said, they're just trying their best. And I've also, because the intelligence of God and this intricate reality, I've cast them in this movie and reality of mine. So how could I possibly be mad at anyone for reflecting back to me what I need to grow my consciousness and learn? It's like, yes, okay. I'll almost thank you instead of blame. I forgive you for that. I forgive myself for not knowing any better.
Yeah.
Forgiving myself, that has been something I've been working on and continue to work on, because I almost forget. I'm easy to forgive other people, but then I place still blame on myself for not being more evolved, healed, and things like that, honoring what I've gone through. And it's like, okay, wait a minute, I've got to actually forgive myself first also. Because forgiving others is easy when you forgive yourself.
Yeah.
But when you're stuck within these low levels of consciousness and want to continue playing the victim and blame, you're not going to transcend or become aware that has nothing to do with the other person. That's where I think, unfortunately, humanity is stuck in. We can't understand to forgive everybody for what's been going on to help us evolve, because we're missing the picture. Everybody's giving each other lessons to transcend on this beautiful map of consciousness, and we're missing it.
We get so caught up in our stories or our validation
or our belief that we're separate from anything around us.
We're the victim of life, and that we need to be validated for what we've been through. And when you forgive somebody, it's not for them, it's for you. It's an opportunity to let go of a low level relationship or interaction or something. You're letting go of something that ties you to a lower frequency. There's a really good example of this, actually. I think it's a good example in the movie A Bronx Tale.
Haven't seen it.
Yeah, okay, so you won't know if I'm explaining it wrong because it's been so long since I've seen it. But there's a really cool scene in it where the kid, if anybody hasn't seen it, the main character, his name is Kalashiro, and he starts working for a mob boss in the neighborhood in the Bronx. I think it takes place in the 60s, and starts doing low level whatever he's doing, criminal activities. And there's some kid in the neighborhood who owes him $20 or something like that. And when he sees him, he chases after him. The kid runs away, and he keeps almost making a scene of it, where every time he sees this kid, he's gonna get him, he's gonna get his money back, because he's owed this money. And then the one day he's chasing after the kid and kind of makes a fool of himself, and the mob boss guy who he's working for stops him. He's like, what are you doing? And he explains to him, this guy owes me money, I got to get my money, he needs to respect me. And he was like, no, just let it go. how much, like, do you like him? And he's like, no. Like, do you care if he's in your life? He's like, no, like, you're getting off easy for $20. That guy, you just like bought that guy's life. He's out of your life now. So he'll leave you alone forever. He's never going to ask you for anything. He's never going to try to take advantage of you. He's never going to do it. And it's like, it's such a beautiful example of like a quantitative view of forgiveness, where it's like it has nothing to do with that guy. But for $20, he's out of your life and you never have to deal with him again, because what he's doing is for $20, he's detaching from something that lowers his frequency and makes him look bad and makes him feel bad. And rather than getting stuck in it, or rather than needing everybody to know that he got what he was owed, he can just give it up and it's gone and it's over. And then he can move on.
Yeah. Oh
Right?
my God.
It's such a great example, because I think that's what we do is people want to be the victim so bad. They're like, no, like that person wronged me and I want everybody to know that I got what I deserve. And it's like, who cares? Nobody cares. Nobody cares about you anyway. Like, for the most part, like, walk down the street, nobody cares about me when I walk down the street. So why do I care what they think about me? Or why do I care if they know that I got what I deserve? They're not going to think about me again. So it's like, just do the thing that allows you to be happy. So like, that's what I mean. Like, forgiveness isn't for the other person. Forgiveness is for me, so that I can be freed of this thing that drags me down, and that I can evolve and ascend and see things from a higher vantage point.
Mm-hmm.
So the example in that movie is an example of viewing the situation from a higher level of awareness. So the mob boss was higher consciousness, and he was able, from his vantage point, he looks at it and he's like, $20, that's cheap. Now that guy's out of your life and you win. Why are you still fighting at that level? Just evolve. And it's like, that's the gift that we all have in any situation, is to look at it from a higher level, see how we actually benefit from it and grow from it. And then our consciousness is changed. Like, that is a literal, like, in real time evolution of your consciousness. And then going forward, you have that information to make different choices in the present moment, because the present moment is the only thing that exists. So it's like your consciousness becomes informed by your experiences, so that in the present experience, you can make better choices and live a better life. I think that's the power of recognizing consciousness and being aware of the opportunity we have to grow and expand and evolve our consciousness.
Consciousness is the new currency. I absolutely love it. I think that was such a fabulous way to end and wrap up. Just lastly, want to reiterate again, Dan and I are on this consciousness journey with everybody. We don't believe we're better than anybody. We don't think we're more evolved. We don't think we're more anything. We are simply voicing our opinion, our experiences, and what's changed profoundly in our lives, and the way that we feel, the way that we see the world, view the world, and have hope for where humanity's going on this evolution. And not everything we're saying is going to ring true to everybody. It's just our truth right now. And I can't overemphasize that we want to continue to have these conversations, and we are nowhere near the level of enlightenment, but we hope that we're on the path of it and can recognize it and see it more, and we're understanding the synchronicities in our life and more opportunities that are being presented to us to grow. That's all we're ever learning or wanting to learn and evolve, is to become the highest version of ourselves within this lifetime, and to continue down this path. It's all about self-discovery, and self-development. What
you said earlier, I think, was perfect. It was like, I don't know where I am on the scale. All I know is that I feel significantly better than I used to.
Yes.
And I want to keep feeling better. And what I want for myself, I want for everybody, because I know how shitty it can be to feel miserable and feel like life is happening to you. And I also know that as you transcend that and can see the world differently,
Yes.
It gets so much better. And that's what I want to share with people, because we all have the capacity to feel really, really good.
Yeah. And I'm gonna just bring this back personally really quickly so people can understand. And I don't know if there's anybody listening who hasn't been listening, but when we listen to this book, or I was first introduced to this map of consciousness, about 4.5 years ago, whatever it was, it is then an unraveling and unlearning of a lot, but then trying to raise my consciousness, becoming more aware, asking for things in my life to present me, to help me evolve. Never did I think what ensued over the last 18 months with my mother being diagnosed with, lung cancer, and then the treacherous road that took with surgery after surgery, her then having stomach cancer, my stepbrother suddenly dying out of nowhere, and then my cousin, who really was a sister and my best friend, dying within a 2-month period. That could have sent, I really honestly don't know how I've done this, but I think a big part of it was recognizing that this is happening for me. As bizarre as that may seem, I have to understand that there is a light at this end of the tunnel, and that I'm going through this spectrum of emotions to feel my way into higher and higher levels of consciousness. Because if I was stuck in shame and guilt and this victim mentality, I don't think I would have gotten out of bed most of the days. I didn't get out of bed a lot of the days, or at least for a lot of the time, but it does. It's like, those are the instances, like we talked about in the middle. I'm much more equipped to handle life's challenges in different ways. I'm seeing things much differently than a lot of other people in my life that are going through the same experiences. I'm able to take a bigger observation and awareness and love of life, that I know it's happening for me and for my highest and greatest good. And if that can help others, if I'm able to shine my own light to illuminate others, then that is what's bringing me, into this next stage and journey of this evolution.
I love that. I think that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that I keep saying the word awareness. I think the more awareness we have, the easier it is to navigate the experiences of life.
Yeah. And from higher frequencies.
Yeah.
Those higher energetic frequencies of, like you said, empathy, sympathy, forgiveness, understanding, neutrality. It's like, oh, okay. Everything will make sense at some point. It's just becoming more aware, observing, understanding, and then gracefully allowing the patience that you require to unlearn what we've all been taught and conditioned to learn.
Yeah, that's it.